everyone, Pineapple here with the next 3 stories of the Fugitive Doctor adventures. Box Set 2, Dead or Alive. Now last time in Most Wanted we had 2 good stories and one in the middle that was pretty great. And today we have 3 more, all positive, and perhaps this box set is even better than the last. And I feel it's because this box set really knows how to play to its strengths. It explores and develops both the Doctor and Cosmo, takes advantage of the Fugitive Doctor's situation, and brings with it pretty great performances. Why don't we start by jumping into episode 1, Flying Solo. Flying Solo was written by Tajinder Singh Haya, and matches the first story of the last box set, Fast Times, quite well. An action story based around jumping between times and events, but less varied and action-fueled, and more focused on a main character. First we should talk about the Fugitive Doctor, reprised by Jo Martin. Now before I've said that while I love her performance and character, there have been problems. Depending on the script, I think she can occasionally be too abrasive, or the focus of her lost memories can get repetitive. And while the next 2 stories do some good stuff with her, here was a bit of a generic Doctor story. Now that's nothing bad, it's just that I don't think this plays to her strength. She seems unconcerned with the humans knowing about her interactions with Cosmo are nothing new, but I do like the way she talks with the main character Mahinda. Mahinda is played by Raj Katak, who we last heard long back in Monsters in Metropolis. And while he could be a bit abrasive at times, and the whole "do I have the right aspect of his character" wasn't as well explored as possible, Mahinda is a well-built character as we do learn about him early on, and he not only does well as a mouthpiece to teach the listener about history, but with his debilitating mental state, even if you know he won't interfere in the timeline, the character drama is played really well, so is interesting to hear. Finally, we have Cosmo, reprised by Alice Krieger, and while I like Cosmo gone in this set, this really is just the baseline Cosmo. Sure, she has more of a character than in either Fast Times or Dimension of Lost Things, opening the door for her in the next 2 stories to be more complex. But here, she's just not that interesting. Just there to set off the plot and be a ticking timer for drama, even though we already have a couple in the plane's fuel and Mahinda's debilitating mentality. So while I'm not amazed by the character, the way the Doctor and Mahinda are in the plot was pretty interesting. The episode starting with Mahinda being disciplined, his British superior critical of the Indian sentiments against the Brits' ingrained but low-key racism. Meanwhile, Cosmo attacks the TARDIS with a time disruptor, causing an anomaly that sucks Mahinda's Spitfire up and spits him out along his personal timeline in India's past. The Doctor isn't up to the task, but knows what she needs to do.
My ship is damaged and I'm being hunted. It's too risky for me to even try.
I understand.
Great. I'm about to do something stupid, aren't I?
Cosmo is on her tail, but she pops back to help Mahinda, currently flying over Punjab. But a few years too early, in fact, so early that the Doctor gets captured and taken to Alexander the Great, trying to get out of there ASAP, since if Mahinda touches down, who knows what butterfly effect that would cause. Alexander is reprised by John Dorney, who previously played him in Farewell Great Macedon. And while it's not really relevant, I think it's a really cool recurring character that sort of flies under the radar, as I had heard he was returning but completely forgot until he popped up. It's just a nice detail. Once again, Mahinda is thrown through time, landing now on the day of the Jallianwala Bagh massacre. And while I think it may just be a tad less enjoyable than Fast Times, I do really appreciate that this story and its many locations are all based around Indian history, instead of sci-fi action set pieces. Mahinda, exposed to time energy, is starting to decay, having blackouts and losing inhibitions, so he's warring with himself to change history. Cosmogon gets some good stuff, mostly in performance. I think her inclusion in the story was pretty unneeded, but as she talks with Mahinda, she shows us her morals, trying to be kind and caring, even if still very stalwart in her pursuit. The Doctor basically repeats her encounter with Alexander with another historical figure, Clive of India. Mahinda gets some good arguing with Cosmo as he plans to disrupt history, but instead of shooting him out of the sky, she gets the Doctor to talk him down. And it's a nice difference to the last box set. Cosmo knowing the Doctor better now, knowing she'll help Mahinda, allowing her, but also taking the chance to capture her. The Doctor manages to talk him down as he starts fraying, and thanks to following him through his journey, she just manages to patch him back together in his present. The story story ends with Cosmo taking the Doctor away, only for Mahinda to pay the Doctor back for her help, using the properties of his Spitfire thanks to the time travelling to sever the link between the TARDISes, allowing the Doctor to escape, which is probably one of the best representations of the Doctor's personality for Cosmo. She helped someone, showing her innate goodness that Cosmogon doubted last time, and in doing so made an avenue for escape in the shape of a friend. So that was Flying Solo, a pretty interesting story, but Cosmo probably could have been used better, and while visiting the different times was fun, the Doctor meeting Alexander was nice to have, her then meeting someone else and doing basically the same thing, while doing well to inform us on history, was a little repetitive, and in little moments boring. This is a pretty good start to the box set, and I'll give Flying Solo by Tajinder Singh Hayer a good 7 out of 10. Next up is the Junkyard Loop by Aaron Douglas. This is a pretty interesting story for both the Doctor and Cosmogon. For Cosmo, it starts showing more of her depth as she will do a lot to get the Doctor under lock and key, but paired with a more rogue division agent. What exactly she won't do in the pursuit of her target, where her moral limit is, building on her very little moments in the last episode, is really interesting. But the Doctor is front and centre, and much like Dimension of Lost Things, although better than that, it takes advantage of the Fugitive Doctor and her story arc. Not only does it start teasing the existence of some of the information people from Division want, there being a man in a grey suit also teased next story, but that's not where the line is drawn for the use of the story arc. The Doctor herself is played well again, but the script and acting both show this Doctor's moral side clearly, and who she thinks is worth saving. How far will this more aggressive and at times a little nihilistic Doctor go until she prioritizes herself? And it's a very needed and interesting way to explore the Doctor. We have two other main characters. The first is a friend the Doctor remembers, but only partially, remembering travelling together but not their separation, and the fact that Sedalis, played by Charlotte Palmer, has been waiting for her on what is essentially a junkyard planet for a long time. The character is played very well, and I think that the dynamic they have with the Doctor makes this a really interesting story. The way they've both changed, especially as we explore this Doctor's morality, and many times butting heads with Sedalis' ruthless methods. And lastly, we have a division, but slightly rogue commander, played by longtime Big Finish actor Alexander Vlahos, Zetorius. Now, while I think he should have been focused on more as the villain, having presumably been the one to hold Sedalis' freedom over her head personally, in exchange for the Doctor, he plays the slightly unhinged but enjoyable evil agent quite well. There were one or two moments I thought he might get far too campy, but he always managed to pull me back in. In the beginning, Cosmo is of course chasing the Doctor, only for the Doctor to come across a hypercube, sending her to Sedalis. But upon landing, she is immediately assaulted by voices and time frost parasites, only surviving thanks to Sedalis' intervention. While I'm not sold on the name, the time frost parasites are an interesting concept, sort of feeding on a memory of yours and leaking and imprinting it onto the world around you. So when people tread through your death place, they wander through or hear your memory. And it's of course on theme with this Doctor, who by the time Big Finish finishes with her, I think will be matching the 8th Doctor with mind wipes. Sedalis and the Doctor reconnect as her years of isolation and the memory screwing have made her wary, and their chemistry is immediate. Sedalis is a little salty of how long she was left, but happy to be rescued, even if there's a ticking clock with the parasites probably soon to be feasting on the TARDIS. Meanwhile, Cosmo arrives only to be met by Zetorius, ready for an unstable alliance, both needing the Doctor. The origin of the sonic screwdriver might be teased, which is crazy, Sedalis asking if the Doctor wants one of her sonic devices.
And what about this?
That sonic screwdriver.
Nifty. You know, I was always jealous of your mechanical skills.
Hands off, sticky fingers.
The Doctor would rather not use guns, which lines up with the Fugitive of the Judoon, where her gun was more of a mind trick than a weapon. The two of them make a plan on how to deal with some of the following parasites, while Cosmo and Zetorius do some classic rank pull dick measuring, planning an ambush at the TARDIS, while the Doctor criticises Sedalis for her enjoyment of the action. After some fighting, the Doctor gets caught again, managing to remember her final moments with Sedalis before being rescued again. But as they make it to the TARDIS, the trap is sprung, Zetorius claiming her with maximum cheese.
Cheese.
Zatorius reveals that Sedalis was part of luring her here, and Zatorius wants to know information on the Man in Grey. But she doesn't know anything, even though Cosmo tries to take the Doctor before Zatorius can go nuts.
Come on, let's get nuts.
The Doctor uses Sedalis' sonic to send the parasites at them. The Division force is too preoccupied to stop them. Sedalis tries to convince the Doctor to let Cosmo and the platoon die, but in the end, Sedalis sacrifices herself to give the Doctor more time to escape. Cosmogon using the distraction to flee too, but Zatorius isn't too mad when he informs Division about what happened. The episode ends with the Doctor still running, but Cosmo still urging her to hand herself over as they butt moral and philosophical heads. So the Junkyard Loop. While I'm not sure what the titular loop is, it's a pretty good episode. It takes full advantage of the Doctor's position, giving Joe Martin great material, has great new characters in Sedalis who expands upon the idea of characters like Carvanista, and Zatorius, while very camp, was never negative, even if he got a little close. The action is engaging, and I like the way it integrates bits of the Doctor's future, even if in this the use of the sonic was a bit much. So I'll give The Junkyard Loop by Aaron Douglas a very good 8 out of 10. Finally, we have Hereafter by Tim Foley, because with this and Vampire Weekend, I guess Tim just had a hankering for vampire stories with Chibnall doctors. But that's not all we've got in Hereafter. This also reaches the peak of what these stories have been building towards. A proper focus on Cosmogon, that paired with the Doctor's warring morality and a good vampire story leaves this box set off on a high note. We have 4 major players in this story, of course starting with the Doctor. Now, while arguably the focus of this story is on Cosmo, the Doctor still gets some great moments, from the comedic to the dramatic. Moments where she builds the gravitas of the vampires and thinks on her own morality, as she is given a very easy out to dump Cosmo in the clutches of a vampire queen, and go on her merry way, but instead follows through with a gambit to beat the Queen and keep Cosmo alive in an almost 7-ish move. She is pretty good in this episode, even if arguably she isn't the focus. Of course, after that we have main character status Cosmogon, and this is exactly what I've wanted. Sure, by the end of the story the status quo hasn't altered at all, but Cosmogon's story with her father and the way it ties into present events were all written fairly well, and from both actors are portrayed really well. Not only are they both interesting and sympathetic, even if Cosmo is a bit of a bitch in the past, their relationship is easy to get invested in, and the bittersweet ending pays off the flashbacks and the mirroring done of the story of Cosmogon well. Simultaneously, this could be a great character end for some, but that would feel cheap for a character like Cosmo. I think the story is what truly cements Cosmo as the antagonist, not the villain. Sure, we've seen glimpses of her compassion before, but this story truly cemented her for me as a character I want to see more of and be more explored. Coming off of Cosmogon's importance, we have her father, Astrabar, played by Terence Wilton, a Doctor Who alumni having been in Invasion of the Dinosaurs. And while the initial story of Astrabar is something I've definitely seen in other media, the way the character is played, how well he gels with Cosmogon, and the end of the story all amount to a pretty emotionally satisfying and interesting character. Even if the beginning of the story and how Cosmo betrayed him while thinking it's the right thing to do was a bit overdone, his story also allows us a good look into the early isolationist and non-intervention way of life on early Gallifrey, possessing items and even vocal statements of ideas around other worlds, punishable offences. Lastly is the villain of the piece, Queen Vidilla, played by Claire Perkins, of EastEnders and Silo fame. And I honestly didn't have any great thoughts on her. She isn't unmemorable or flat, but apart from the entertaining semi-camp yet still threatening performance, the dialogue of the character wasn't as interesting as I wished. The plot twist of how they beat her far more interesting than the character herself. So, into the story itself, Cosmo is on the Doctor's tail once again, but both their TARDISes are swept up and dropped on a less than usually civilized planet. Shown right at the start, intercut through the story, will be flashbacks about Cosmo and her father on Gallifrey. Her father, a free spirit, eager to learn about and visit the stars, something quite frowned upon on Gallifrey in general, but more so at this point in time. Cosmo going all Red Scare after her mother passes, and her father seemingly dying in, or just out of detainment. But not before gifting her a special ring that was supposed to be a gift to her mother. These flashbacks are well cut in throughout the story, often relating to something happening in the present. The Time Lord's coming upon a girl named Herma, worried about her supposedly dead father, and doing activities Cosmo used to do with Astrabar, dredging up these memories. So not only are they entertaining, but fit into the story well on multiple levels. The Doctor is pretty peeved at being grounded. Cosmo trying not to engage with her, but they head for civilization, as said before, coming across the steak-making Herma, who is initially hesitant about them, but agrees to lead them back to town. The Doctor notices Cosmo is off, and returning to town, Herma is taken away and locked up by the mayor's goons. The travellers rightly finding this suspicious. They've just so happened to arrive on the day of a ritual, where the villagers' dead are dumped into a river running upstream. Some reverse mountain type shit. And although the Time Lords are welcomed by the mayor, he is being harassed in the form of mind violation by Queen Vidilla. Their village having history, murals of her appearing around and instinctively putting the Time Lords on edge. The Doctor's suspicions of her blood-sucking nature confirmed by Herma once they break her out. Herma was planning to go stake the bodies before they're sent upstream to the Queen, hoping to stop them being violated, but Cosmo has left her ring behind. The Doctor and Herma observe the dumping of the bodies, an extra body added as Cosmo has been captured and sent up to the vamp, even though she goes out pretty pathetically.
Ah, you wouldn't be room service, would you? Now hang on, what are you...
Knowing Cosmo will live in the river thanks to their respiratory bypass, the Doctor's conscience takes over and they head up the mountain to the Queen's lair. The confrontation between the Queen and the Doctor is fairly entertaining, but like I said before, I'm not that terribly interested in the character. Even with the campy performance, I just feel a bit indifferent, unlike Sartorius, who I found really engaging. The Queen's plan and backstory are both more interesting than not, having one of Gallifrey's forbidden relics, the Bloodstone, aptly named for a vampire. She exposits her whole plan, what she's done, and how she's rebuilding her empire. All she needs is the blood of a Time Lord, wanting Cosmo in return for letting the Doctor go. Cosmo has some interesting moments while sneaking around, but doesn't really accomplish anything more than letting Herma get away with her barely still alive father. The Doctor plays sacrificing Cosmo, even if I didn't buy it for a second, but the Queen is repelled and buried by the soul of Astrabar, coming from Cosmo's ring. The ring that's been talked about again and again, turning out to be another hidden relic, one her father appropriated, allowing them to escape. Herma causes the town to revolt, tossing the mayor into the river, which is a pretty good ending, but the better one is after Cosmo wakes up, the Doctor having carried her down the mountain, the partially regenerated Time Lord, thanks to the Queen's attack, gets to spend a final day with her father, whose spirit is almost gone from the ring. Cosmo allowing the Doctor until her father goes to get a head start. But then, Cosmo will still keep coming for her. Not only a good ending for the box set, which was building up these characters, but a great story to flesh out Cosmo properly. Just like I said before, still being the antagonist, but clearly not villainous. I forgot to mention, but in return for saving Cosmo, Astrabar uses his powers to unlock some of the Doctor's memories, her wondering who the man in the grey suit she sees is, carrying over from the last story. A nice way to set up a continuing arc. So with some meh moments and characters, we get an interesting story, some real fleshing out of our protagonist and antagonist, a great mix of comedy and drama, and of course, a lovely bittersweet ending, tying into the flashbacks really well. The Queen and giving Cosmo something to do while the Doctor talks to the Queen are really the only meh moments, nothing bad, so I'll mark the third story of the box set, or the Fugitive Doctor Adventures Episode 6, Hereafter by Tim Foley, mostly good as the best of the box set at an 8.5 out of 10. Not as good as, say, a 9, but is certainly worthy of the best position here. This leaves the box set with a total score of 7.8, matching it with the last box set, so when recommending one or the other, although I wouldn't listen to this one without listening to the last one, I'd say this is better in seeing more of who Cosmo is, and doing more with the idea of the Doctor being a fugitive. Whereas Fast Times is the only one to take full advantage of that last time, it having two other stories, one good and one great, that are less about the Doctor being a fugitive, and are arguably at their heart more about their own concepts than the premise of the Fugitive Doctor. Thank you everybody for watching my review of this set of the Fugitive Doctor Adventures. Please like the video if you liked it, comment down below if you wish, consider subscribing to the channel, and if you do, ring the notification bell so you're told every single time that I make an upload. Once again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next review. Bye!
Toast. A little piece of toast. Because there's so much to choose from. There's brown bread, white bread, all sorts of wholemeal bread. It comes in funny packages with writing on the side.